Years before the United States was born, a small pioneer settlement in the colony of Virginia was established called Draper's Meadow. Now, William and Mary Draper lived there with their 2 young sons. Next door, in another roughly built cabin, was her widowed mother, Eleanor. Mary's brother, Johnny, and his wife, Bet, and their wee infant also lived in this settlement. Now, some of the folks in Draper's Meadow spoke English, some German, but they all were good friends who had worked together to clear the land, build their cabins, and plant their crops. And although the Indians lived close by, the settlers had existed during years of peaceful coexistence. Now it was 1755, and there were distant rumblings of war heard throughout the land. For you see, the British colonists were upset because French soldiers from Canada were trying to control these lands west of the Allegheny Mountains, lands which England had previously claimed as her own. And the settlers, many of them had already cleared the land and built their cabins and settled their families. They didn't want to give them up and go back east over the Blue Ridge. France had recruited many of the Indian tribes, and the French were offering handsome rewards for every scalp, every man's, woman's, and child's. Well, you see, the French and Indian War began between France and England because the countries could not solve their many differences peacefully. The French and the Indians joined to fight against the British and the colonists here in what would be the United States. Well, King George III of England had sent over 1,000 British troops to the colonies to ensure the safety of the settlements. General Edward Braddock had commanded an attack against the French and the Indians. Young Colonel George Washington was under Braddock's command. Washington had 2 white stallions shot out from beneath him, but he suffered nary a scratch. The Indians claimed Washington was protected by magic. Well, Braddock was defeated, and Fort Duquesne was burned to the ground. Many settlers massacred. Bands of angry Shawnees swarmed out over the land into the Ohio Valley, armed and looking for scalps. Many, many settlers were murdered or taken hostage by these Indians. Settlements were burned, crops destroyed, valuables plundered. Well, Colonel Washington was sent to build forts along the Blue Ridge and to enlist what were called volunteers, which were settlers who were willing to come and man these forts to help protect the settlements. Well, only a handful of volunteers had been raised when a surveyor by the name of Colonel Patton arrived in Draper's Meadow. He was expecting to find the settlement abandoned, with the settlers having moved back east over the Alleghenies. Imagine his surprise when he found the cabins occupied, the settlers going busily about getting ready to harvest their crops for the winter. Saturday evening, July 7th, 1755. Worried families had gathered around the fireplace in the Ingles cabin to sing songs from their homelands, tell stories, read chapters from the Bible. Outside, in the darkness, painted faces watched and waited.